Hello everybody, welcome to Megha Discourse, and in today's video we would be analyzing 2021 previous year question paper of GATE examination, and that examination was conducted by IIT Bombay itself. In this video we would be dealing with the English literature portion only, which would cover 40 questions, right? And we would also analyze other 3 options with the answer itself in order to get a big picture of the question paper, because GATE examination does not ask chronology and facts based knowledge of a person. They always tend to prefer the critical thinking and in-depth knowledge and how we apply the concepts to the things. So this is the approach of GATE examinations. Let me mention this before that we would also analyze PYQ of 2022, 2023, 2024 and 2025. Within upcoming 2 or 3 days, we would complete this series of PYQs for the upcoming GATE 2026 examination, and we would also upload lectures exclusively for our upcoming GATE, which would be conducted by IIT Guwahati. So let us just start our video. Now let us just see question number 1 to 12. Now they are the multiple choice questions and they would be having 1/3 as a negative marking. So please always read the instructions before attempting the questions. Now first thing. So our first question here is which of the following texts is a collection of stories that a group of pilgrims tell each other? So here we know that the Canterbury Tales is one such story in which we have multiple pilgrims, and they are going to the shrine of Thomas Becket shrine, and we have in total of like 29 plus 1 pilgrims, right? So they are telling the stories to each other. We have the host, and the name of the host is Halle Belly. So that host is telling the pilgrims that you have to tell 2 stories while going to the shrine and 2 stories while coming back from this shrine. So it would be in around 120 stories, but they were all left unfinished, right? So this is all about the Canterbury Tales, and this is written by Geoffrey Chaucer, right? Next, the other thing that we should know about this Canterbury Tales is that it is one of the first poetry that was written in an English language, right? And now when it comes to the other options, which is the Shepherd's Calendar, now this was written by Edmund Spenser, right? And this is the first work of Edmund Spenser, and this is based on the Virgil's Eclogues, right? And we have 12 months. These 12 months are represented here. We have 12 short poems, we would say, right? So this is the Shepherd's Calendar. And then we have other options, which is the Pilgrim's Progress. Now this was written by John Bunyan. It is also a kind of spiritual allegorical work in which we have allegories, right? The representation where the characters are named as faithful. These are the names of character: faithful, evil, right? And it is a kind of story in which we have a pilgrim who is going into a journey of enlightenment, we would say, and this is a journey of a progression or a spiritual awakening kind of thing, right? Next we have the Parliament of Fools, and this Parliament of Fools is it is also written by Geoffrey Chaucer, right? It is a kind of a work in which so many foals, or we can say birds, they all assemble at one place and they talk of the marriage of some birds, right? And in this work we tend to know that why Valentine's Day is celebrated. So through this work we get to know this, right? Now let us just move to our another question. So here the next question is which of these is not an autobiography? Which of these is not an autobiography? So always, whenever you try to attempt such questions, always take a look at the language of the question. They are asking not. So this is the most important thing here, right? So here, Baby Kamble, who has written The Prisons We Broke, is also known as Gina Amucha. Gina Amucha. It is an autobiographical work written by Baby Tai Kamble, right? Then we have Bama Kuruku. Now this is also an autobiographical work. So these are all the Dalit, Dalit autobiographies. Please do remember, if you want to watch a video on this particular topic on the Dalit literature, then we have a video on this also. Please check out our channel and the playlists. Then we have Mulk Raj Anand's Untouchable. Now this is not an autobiography at all. This Om Prakash Valmiki's Juthan. Now this is also an autobiography. So here we can say the answer would be, so they are asking not, so the answer would be this, C, because all of A, B and D are the autobiographies, right? Let us move to another question. Here we have writer's workshop and BLAFT are. So writer's workshop and BLAFT, another question that was asked in the previous year, that was asked by the UGC net also. So this is a niche publishing houses in India that focuses on particular genres, and this was founded in 1958 by Purushottam Das Lal, right? And in 2010 Purushottam Lal died, and after this his family, Purushottam Lal's family, is running this publishing house, and we had 8 members in this, including Anita Desai. Please do remember these facts, right? Question number 4, which is the following lines capture the central trope of well-known 18th century satirical tract. Now you should know this is all about the satirical tract, which makes us satires, which mocks the hypocrisies of the world. So I have been assured by a very knowing American of my acquaintance in London that a young healthy child, well nursed, is at a year old a most delicious, nourishing and wholesome food. So this is a kind of satire by Jonathan Swift. The answer is here Jonathan Swift, A Modest Proposal. Now this is an essay which was written by Jonathan Swift, a satirical essay, a juvenile satire, in which he critiques the Britishers when they were ruling Ireland, and in Ireland they were not feeding the child, they were not giving them money. It was a kind of poverty all around, and because of malnutrition, because of hunger, children were dying. So that is why Jonathan Swift has written this essay in order to satire that authority, right? J.S. Mill's Own Liberty, it is all about the tyranny of majority, that if most of the people agree to a certain concept or point or some idea, that does not mean that the idea is right. So this is the tyranny of the majority. So he is against that thing. Then we have this Francis Bacon's On Death, in which he says that we should not fear death because death is inevitable, and only after the death you will be recognized by the people. They will not be jealous of yours. And there are people like lovers, heroic figures, and people who want revenge. So they are always, they are always ready to die, and they do not have such fear. So yes. Then we have Robert Graves' Warning to Children. Now this is a poem, right? So here the answer would be that which is the satirical tract, and these lines are from this Jonathan Swift's Modest Proposal. Question number 5. Whose poem does Clint Brooks close read to arrive at this concept of the well-wrought on? Now this well-wrought on was written by Clint Brooks, right? So Brooks has analyzed John Keats', the work Ode on a Grecian Urn, right? So after analyzing this poem of John Keats, here we have a line, beauty is truth, truth beauty, and that is all you need to know. So here Clint Brooks analyzes this line, says that we should not analyze this line out of the context of this poem, right? If we want to analyze any poem, any sentence of some poem, we should analyze that line, that idea, that sentence, in the context of the work itself, in the context of the poem itself, right? Because we have seen that there are multiple, interpretations, or we can say misinterpretations on the part of different critiques over this line. Satyam Shivam Sundaram, that is the meaning of this, beauty is truth, truth beauty, right? So she also Brooks also analyzes John Donne and other writers in this work. Please tell me in the comment section who are the writers that are close read by the Clint Brooks in this work, right? And then we have other writers who are William Wordsworth, very famous romantic poet who is famous for lyrical ballads, very famous for lyrical ballads, which is a kind of manifesto of romantic age, romanticism, which talks of nature, love, individualness. And then we have William Blake, who is also a pre-romantic poet, and then we have Alfred Tennyson, who is a Victorian poet, and he has also received Chancellor's Gold Medal for a poem which is Timbuktu, right? Timbuktu. Then other fact that we know of Albert Tennyson is he has written an elegy which is in memoriam, and this elegy is written for his friend who was Arthur Hallam, right? So please remember these facts. So here the answer would be John Keats' Ode on a Grecian Urn. Next question is, which is common among Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities, Mahashweta Devi's Mother of 1084, XH-C2, Shobha Shakti's Gorilla, and Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's Half of a Yellow Sun. So let me tell you that all these works are, political uprisings. So answer would be A, that these novels are set during the times of political uprising. So let me tell you that Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities is all about the French Revolution. It is set in this context of a French Revolution, in which he talks of the cities like London and Paris. This question has been asked by net so many times. Then we have Shweta Devi's Mother of 1084, that is XH-C2 Ma, right? So this is set against the uprisings of Naxalite movement. Please remember these things, very important. And then we have Shobha Shakti's Gorilla. Now this was written in the context of Sri Lankan conflict, Sri Lankan civil war, we would say. And then we have Adichie's Half of a Yellow Sun. This was also written in an uprising of Biafran uprising, or we can say Nigeria was fighting for its own independence, right? This A would be the answer. Henry James' essay The Art of Fiction, one of the earliest literary critical engagements with the form of the novel, remember this thing, was presented by his book-length study of. Now Henry James has studied exclusively on Nathaniel Hawthorne. This would be the answer. And his works like The Scarlet Letter, very important and can be asked in the GATE examination again, and other works of Nathaniel Hawthorne. Now he is an American writer, right? So Henry James has written a work which is The Art of Fiction, and in this Art of Fiction, this work was written after studying the works of Nathaniel Hawthorne, that how a novel should be written, or fiction, which means novel, how a novel should be written, the art of writing a novel, right? Then we have William Faulkner, again an American writer. Then we have Aphra Behn, British writer of Restoration Age. And then we have this Austin, who is famous for art for art's sake, which is that art is important. Art is not meant to give any moral lessons. Art is an entity in itself. Art is in itself a pleasure. It is in itself a medium of pleasure. So Oscar Wilde is known for this art for art's sake. Aphra Behn, she has written important works like Oronuku and The Royal Slave, The Rover, I would say, The Rover, right? And then we have William Faulkner, who has written The Sound and Fury, and the title of this, The Sound and Fury, the title of this work was based on the Macbeth's quotation, which is that life is all about sound and fury, right? So here The Art of Fiction, which was written by Henry James, was written after a book-length study of Nathaniel Hawthorne. This would be the answer, right? Next question, which of the following is not true of Bram Stoker's Dracula? So here the answer is, it is considered to be a gothic novel, right? It is narrated mostly through letters, this is also right. And Transylvania is an important setting in the novel, this is also right. So not true, so the answer would be, it is a Bildungsroman. So this is not true, so the answer would be D, right? Let us just move to another question. The name is H. Hatter and I am continuing. Biologically, I am 55 of the species. So, the lines above are from an early Indian English novel, and who is the author of this novel? So, the answer is G.V. Desani, right? Because these are the lines of G.V. Desani's work, right? And when it comes to the other options, Alan Seeley, who is very famous for the work Trotternama, right? Trotternama, and he was also awarded as Padam Shri and Sahitya Academy as well. So do check the Wikipedia page of Alan Seeley. Then we have Toru Dutt, the first Indian female poet, I would say. Very important for the works like our Casuarina Tree. We have Ruth Prabhar Jabwala, who has written the Bombay Talkies, a picture that is Bombay Talkies. Now this is a picture based on the story of Ruth Prabhar Jabwala, right? And she works with the Ivory production, and this production is known for making the films like Bombay Talkies, right? Let us move to another question. In Areopagitica, John Milton made an impassioned appeal. So Areopagitica is a work written by John Milton, and it is a kind of appeal against censorship and for freedom of expression. Now this is the right answer, because in this work John Milton asks the government that how can you censor of expression. Writers and the critics were writing on very controversial topics. So in order to suppress them, the government did censor on all kinds of workings, on all kind of these controversial texts. So here John Milton is asking for freedom of expression, right? So A would be the answer. The first institution to teach English literature in the world is, now the answer of this question is marks given to all, right? But still we should know that Fort William College, Calcutta is one such institution where for the first time, say, Oriental literature, Oriental languages were taught to the English civil servants, because they wanted to be the administrator of India, and they needed some knowledge of different Indian languages. So in order to teach them those different kinds of Indian languages, this Fort William College, Calcutta was established for the first time, right? And at that time the viceroy was, I guess, Lord Wellesley, right? Then we have question number 12, which is, which one of the following texts propounds the aesthetic theory of Rus? Now we all know the answer, that the theory of Rus, the 9 kinds of Rus, was given in Natya Shastra, which was written by Bharat Muni. Earlier Indian texts, right, known for their aesthetic theories. And in this we have 9 rasas, and the Rus theory has been discussed in the chapter number 6 and chapter number 7. Remember this fact, right? And then we have Abhigyan Shakuntala. Now this was written by Kalidas. It is all about the memory of Shakuntala, where the king, he forgets about the beloved. He forgets about her beloved Shakuntala. And when he sees the ring which is there, when he sees that ring which was a kind of token of love between them, when he sees that ring, he suddenly remembers that, oh, she is my beloved Shakuntala itself. So that is why the title is Abhigyan Shakuntala. Now I know there is some Shakuntala. Then we have Manusmriti. Now Manusmriti was an earlier Indian text which is which talks about that how a country should be, and what kind of structures, or we can say hierarchies, we have in the country. For instance, we have Shudras, that we have Vaishya, we have Brahman, and all those categories. So this structural hierarchy, we can say Varna system, was introduced in this Manusmriti itself, and that is the reason, very important fact you should know. And this, because of this Varna system, B.R. Ambedkar, Ambedkar burned this book, right? He burned this book because this book is responsible for introducing Varna system in our country. Please know this fact, right? And then we have other works like Charak Samhita. It is a kind of earlier tract, or we can say a textbook based for the knowledge of medicine, written by Charak itself, for the medicine written by Charak itself. Okay, let us just move to another question. Now we have multiple select questions. Now we have multiple answers. So we can select A, B, C, D. We can select all. We can select 2. We can select 3. So these are multiple select questions, right? And carry 1 mark each. No negative marking. Please look at this fact. No negative marking. So please always attempt these kinds of questions. Do not leave any question of MSQ, because they do not have any negative marking, right? So here 13. Which of the following novels are predominantly set in Bombay? So here Kiran Nagarkar's Ravan and Eddie, Rohina Mistri's A Fine Balance, and Salman Rushdie's Midnight Children. These are all based on Bombay, right? But Arvind Adiga's The White Tiger is based on an unidentified city, right? We do not know the name of this city. So here the answer would be this. So the question is, which of the following are predominantly set? So the answer here would be A, B and C. All of these would be the answers, because we have multiple select questions, right? And please tell me in the comment section the second part of, or we can say the sequel of Ravan and Eddie. Please tell me in the comment section. Question number 14. Which of the following critically rewrites canonical English novels? So here J.M. Coetzee's 4. Canonical means that first we have the canonical, the important classical works. Now some of them has written a sequel, or we can say another interpretation of these canonical works. So here J.M. Coetzee has written 4, which is a, we can say, reinterpretation of the novel Robinson Crusoe, which was written by Daniel Defoe, right? An adventurous novel, or we can say the first novel, one of the first novels of our English language. Then we have Jean Rey's Wide Sargasso Sea. This is also the answer. So here we have these two, A and B, the answers, because these reinterpretation of the canonical English novels, and Wide Sargasso Sea is a reinterpretation of Jane Eyre's Jane Eyre, written by Charlotte Bronte. We have, of the following, which novelist combines feminist concerns with magical realism? So which of the novelists here are related to feminism plus magic realism? So here Virginia Woolf is also a feminist writer, and she exclusively is a writer who writes in stream of consciousness. Okay. And then we have Toni Morrison. So here the answer would be Toni Morrison, because she is also feminist writer, plus she also uses magical realism. Please know about magical realism. What is magical realism? Magical realism is all about that, yes, you have the reality, but there is some magic in this reality. There is magical realism, because in the works of magical realism you will see that there is a story which is based on realism, which is a realist story in itself, but here you will find some elements of magic, some supernatural things. So that is magical realism. And the writers that are associated with magical realism are our Rushdie. We have Rushdie, we have Garcia, right? Then we have Toni Morrison itself. So these are all related to the magical realism, right? And then we have Kamla Markandeya. Kamla Markandeya, she has written Nectar in a Sea, very important work. And then we have Svetlana Alexievich. Now she is also one such a writer who writes on realistic things based on the interviews, real life experiences, right? Real life experiences. So right. So here the magical realism plus feminism can be seen in the works of Toni Morrison, right? In which of these Shakespearean plays do important female characters disguise themselves as men? Here the answer would be The Merchant of Venice, As You Like It, and The Twelfth Night. If you read the plays, you will see that there is a female characters do become male by disguising themselves by wearing certain costumes. For instance, in The Merchant of Venice, we see how Portia becomes the lawyer, Balthazar, right? Then we have As You Like It. Here we see that how Rosalind, she disguises herself into Ganymede, right? And then we have Twelfth Night, in which we see how Viola disguises herself into Cesario. So all of these works are written by Shakespeare, and when it comes to disguising, so here these three B, C, D, we see the disguising as an element, right? Then the following words in English are clustered according to their origin, right? Choose the cluster that contains words drawn from languages of the Indian subcontinent. So here A, B and D. So all these clusters are of Indian subcontinent, right? But Philistine, Echo, Panic, Galaxy, these do not originate from Indian subcontinent, right? Remember this fact. Question number 18, which is, which of the following are true of Bronte's, Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre? So this was published under the pen name Currer Bell. Please go and watch the video of pen names recently uploaded on our channel, right? So it was published under the pen name Currer Bell. Yes. It was published originally in 3 volumes. Yes. It has been read as a critique of heterosexual romance, marriage, domesticity. This is also true. The story is told from the point of view of a mad woman in the attic. Now this is wrong. So question is true kaun sa hai? So the answer is A, B and C, right? And when it comes to this D option, however, this work that is Jane Eyre is written not from the point of view of mad woman in the attic, right? This is based on Bertha Mason, who is mad woman in the attic, based on her life. It is not her point of view. This is just based on her life, but not from her point of view, right? Which of the following is an example of noir? Noir is dark, something very dark, or we can say criminal, cynical work, right? So which of the following are examples of noir, popular both as fiction and film? So here the answer would be The Big Sleep and The Maltese Falcon. So these 2 works are an example of noir, right? Question number 20, we have, which of the following use the device of a story within a story, multiple narrators? So here, Wuthering Heights, in this novel, we see that how this was written by Emily Bronte, and in this we see how there is a story within a story. We have a narrator who is listening to the story of another person, right? So we have a story within a story, and that person is telling the story in itself, story actually. So that first we have the Wuthering Heights, and then we see Heart of Darkness. In the Heart of Darkness also we see that how there is a narrator who tells about other person, right? The story of other person. So these B and D would be the answer. Now question number 20 to 31, multiple choice questions carrying 2 marks, and now we have 2 by 3 negative marking. So the risk is higher this side, but still let us see and let us solve them. So match the following plays with genre or style. So first we have Hai Vadna. Now Hai Vadna is based on folk reworking. It is a modernist reworking. So Hai Vadna is a modernist reworking of the folk, right? And there is a writer, German writer, who is Thomas Mann, who has also written the transposed heads, right, which is based on this folk itself, right? Then we have Harvest. This Harvest is a futuristic dystopia, right? In this it is based on 2010 Mumbai, right? That how in the upcoming years there would be a totally dystopia. There would be no utopia. Utopia, a work written by Thomas More, and a very opposite to this thinking is dystopia, right? Where the world would be totally apocalyptic. It would be chaotic, right? So this is a future dystopia, that in the Harvest we are using different kinds of technologies, and for that people are exchanging the body organs. So these things like these would become normal. So that is why it is a futuristic dystopia. Then we have Ghasiram Kotwal. Now this is a political satire. And Ivam Indrajit. Now this is theater of the absurd. This work is an absurdist work, right? Okay, now let us just move to another question. Question number 22. Study the 3 examples below. So whenever you find questions like these where we have big statements, so first calm your mind and then solve the question, right? In George Orwell's novel 1984, the Interior Ministry of Totalitarian State, a state which is totalitarian, which is very oppressing, where you cannot speak, you do not have democracy, you cannot express your thoughts. So this totalitarian state is called Ministry of Love. Now this is very opposite. These ideas are very opposite, right? Second, in the genre of horror fiction, the reader knows that the killer is hiding in the closet, but the protagonist, the hero, does not know this thing. Okay, but Brutus says he was ambitious, and Brutus is an honorable man. William Shakespeare, Julius Caesar. Now these are the instances of, now this question is based on poetic, or we can say literary devices, right? So these are the instances of irony, because here we are finding irony, that how ideas are very contrasting, right? So they are mocking, they are very opposite and opposite, plus they are making a mockery, or we can say a kind of satire, right? So this is the work of an irony, right? How can a totalitarian regime can be called a ministry of love, right? Question number 23, an implied reader. We have done this question in the theory, PYQs, top 100 PYQs in theory. So an implied reader, who is an implied reader? Now this comes in the reader response theory. Reader response theory. We would upload lectures on these theoretical portion, literary theory itself. So the an implied reader is a hypothetical reader. He is hypothetical. He does not exist, he or she does not exist in reality, but exists in our mind, in the mind of the writer who is writing a work, that yes, there would be a certain reader who would be reading this book and he would think like this, like that. So this hypothetical reader, not the actual reader that the text addresses. Now this is known as an implied reader, right? Question number 24. Now let us just read this. A text is made up of multiple writings, right? Yes, because a text has so many writings in itself, because in a book we find different kinds of ideas, different quotations, different allusions, so many ideas derived from so many places, right? So multiple writings का assimilation है, drawn from many cultures, entering into mutual relations of dialogue, because they are from different cultures and they are doing dialogues with each other, they are talking to each other, right? They are having dialogues with each other. Parody, they are the reinterpretation, they are the parody, they are the mimic. Contestations, in competition with each other, but there is one place, now see this thing, but there is one place where this multiplicity is focused, but there is one place where all these multiplicity are focused at one place, and that place is the reader. Who is this? This is the reader, not, as was hitherto said, the author. First, it used to be the author who were at the center of the things. It was the author who decided the text, who decided the meaning, who set the standard, who set the narratives, but now it is the reader. So the birth of the reader must be at the cost of death of the author. So which theoretical school does the excerpt best represents? Idea is all about, given by post-structuralism, or we can say the people who said that there are no structures, we have to deconstruct these structures, and there is no author, it is the reader who is at the center, right? And this was given by Roland Barthes, the essay Roland Barthes, The Death of the Author, right? Literary criticism considers which of the following texts as offering the strongest support for mimetic theories of art. Now this work, which is Aristotle's Poetics, tells of how art is an imitation, that how mimicry is important, that how mimicry is a kind of art, because all art, be it music, painting, dancing, sculpturing or anything, all art has a fundamental basic thing, and that basic thing is mimicry. Mimicry is a very fundamental habit. Monkeys mimic, we mimic. When we were in the childhood, we used to mimic the elders, right? From the mimicry itself, we learn different things, right? Okay, when we look at the options, so Plato, who has written Republic, and in this work he said that the poets must be banned, because in the frenzy they write anything. They are writing on love, they are writing on different kinds of things which are very mad, which are very frenzy, and that is why they should be banned. Then we have Longinus on sublimity. Here he gives 5 things, 5 principles, that if you want a good work, if you want a work which is to be sublime, which that have sublime thoughts, then you should have 5 things. You should follow these 5 rules, like dignified composition. It should be having a good poetic and literary devices. It should be having some noble thoughts and some emotions, right? So all these 5 things. And then we have Horace, the art of poetry. This Horace, art of poetry, here he gives the idea of purple prose. Very important. Purple prose is flowery language. That a writer should not use flowery language, too much exaggeration, that a writing flowery language, people are not able to understand you, right? He should not do this. He also gives the idea of ab ovo and in media res. Do not fear all these terms. I am explaining all these. Ab ovo is at beginning, right? That works should not begin, that any work, any book should not begin from the beginning. It should not begin from the beginning. It should begin in media res. It should begin in middle of things. Thus by it will not become boring at all, right? So this is all about this question. The following is a passage about O.V. Vijayan's The Legends of Khasak. The novel is set in a remote village in the middle of 20th century. The narrative, now see this is the middle of the 20th century, right? The narrative is replete with images of the vast ecosystem of the living and the non-living, a land potent with dreams and legends. Okay, so here is this 20th century, here is this scenery, right? There is a scenery, we have dreams, we have legends, and where we have living things, we have non-living things, right? So this is a kind of scenery. Okay, the analysis presented in this description is congruent with which of the following concepts by Mikhail Bakhtin? Okay, so here we have chronotope. So now these are all the concepts that are given by Bakhtin, but chronotope means that we have a time and place configuration, right? That in a narrative there is an importance of time, there is an importance of place, there is an importance of the scenery that has been said. So here the answer would be chronotope, right? Because here the setting, you can see the setting, that how it is talking of 20th century, which is the time, and how it is talking of the place, that the place is there is a vast ecosystem, living, non-living things, the land has dreams, legends. So this is all the chronotope of that work, right? Then we have dialogism. Dialogism is all about the different dialogues. The meaning comes from the dialogues, that by contestation of different kinds of dialogues, when we have different dialogues from different characters, different voices, the main meaning will arrive from all these things, right? Then we have carnivalesque. Carnivalesque is all about that you have to subvert the what is high culture, what is low culture, what is high, what is low. We are all equal. So like in a carnivalesque, like in a fair, एक मेले में जैसे होता है, that there is nothing high, there is nothing low, we all are enjoying. So that is carnivalesque, right? So similarly in the carnivalesque, there is no high voice, there is no low voice, there is no high culture, no culture, right? We all are equal, all voices are equal. Then we have polyphony. Polyphony is all about the multiplicity of dialogue. Poly means multiple. We have multiple voices in any work, different characters, different works, be it minor character, be it major character, right? Be it any supporting, right? So here the answer would be chronotope. Which of the following did not happen in 1919, the year the First World War ended? Progressive Writers Association was formed in India. Now this is wrong, because the question is asking which did not happen, so this did not happen. because this Progressive Writers Association was formed in India in 1936, not in 1919. Okay. The radical political activist and philosopher Rosa Luxemburg was murdered. Now this happened in 1919. Tagore renounced his knighthood. This also happened. And James Joyce Ulysses was being serialized. Now this happened. So did not happen में क्या आंसर हो जाएगा? That A. That this did not happen, right? Now question number 28. There are two assertions. The assertions means some declaration or statement, right? Dalit narratives like Dalit literature, Dalit works tend to be read single dimensionally. Single dimensionally means seeing one aspect only. Seeing a single aspect of some work, that is reading it single dimensionally. So Dalit narratives tend to be read single dimensionally as evoking the reader's pity at the protagonist's caste humiliation, right? Because yes, so whenever we read the Dalit literature, in the reader's mind we see there is a pity for the hero who is suffering, who is facing the caste humiliation, the biasness, the discrimination, right? So right, then we have or. Dalit narratives tend to be read as telling the story of heroic protest against discrimination, or as a description of the protagonist's rise from misery to triumph. Okay, so this assertion seems to be right. That's fine, good. Now let us read the another assertion. There is a tendency to keep the other in the space of difference as perpetually exotic. Now this is said in the context of post-colonialism, because in the post-colonialism we get this term the other. Other means to make somebody other, to make somebody feel inferior to us, because I am this and you are the other, I am the superior, you are the inferior. So that means othering, right? So that means that there is a difference between me and you. You are exotic, you are strange, and you are inferior. I do not know you, so you do not exist for me, right? So that is this thing. So these two statements, right? Now let us read the question. In the context of the assertions above, which one of the following statements are true? P and Q are contradictory assertions. They are not contradictory. We see that the ideas are very much different, but they are not opposite, right? So this is not the answer. P and Q are compatible assertions. So this is the answer, because they are compatible. Because in both of them we see that how there are two sections. First we have Dalit people who are facing caste based discrimination. Then we see that there are people who are very much superior, but then we have inferior people who are othered by the superior people. So we have divisions, so they seems to be compatible at least. So this is the answer. Let us read C. P and Q cannot be read in relation to each other. So this is wrong, because they can be read in relation to each other because they are compatible. They can be read because this concept of other can be applied to this also, because these Dalits are also in a kind of othered by the other castes. Q is only explanation for P. That Q is the explanation of P. No, this is wrong. So the answer here would be that P and Q are compatible assertions. So this would be the right answer. Some of the recent novels of the Brazilian writer Paulo Coelho were published in multiple languages simultaneously or immediately after the Portuguese edition. Which of the following is this phenomena not an evidence of? So Paulo Coelho was a Brazilian writer and his books were published in multiple languages simultaneously or immediately. So which of the following is this phenomena not an evidence of? So C. Rebecca Walkowitz's argument that novels are often born translated. So this is the right thing. The globality of marketplace for books, Paulo Coelho's expanding popularity, the nation as a sole frame for understanding literature. So this would be the wrong answer, right? So the not an evidence of, so this is the answer D. Because Paulo Coelho was famous because he was becoming popular, because his works were becoming popular, and even globality of marketplace for books, because when books become famous, they gets translated, they gets multiple interpretations, they get translated into multiple languages, right? And that is why the Rabika Walkowitz, now she has written a work which is Born Translated. In this, she says that how translation is important, because by translation we tend to read other cultures, we tend to read different authors, their identity, their theories, their ideas. So translation is very important. If you want to have a power, if you want to express yourself, you should know translation, right? We should go towards the translation studies. So that is why she says that novels are often born translated. Reading novels of Russian novels, German novels. So here the answer would be D part, because this is not an evidence of this thing, right? The question number 30, match the authors in the first column with their respective translators in the second column. Here Madhavi Kuti will be matched to Kamala Das, and you are Anantha Murthy will be matched to A.K. Ramanujan. Then we have the Sal for Chitri, and Indira Goswami for Aruni Kashyap, right? So these are the translators and the authors that are matched over here. Question number 31 to 40. Now these are again multiple select questions, no negative marking. So I would recommend you attempting all these questions, right? Carrying 2 marks, very important, very beneficial for us. Which of the following are true about Gilles Deleuze and Felix Guattari's conception of minor literature? The discussion focuses on the writing of French Kafka. Right. Minor literature is literature that a minority produces in a major language. Right. Minor literature is a form of popular literature. No. And minor literature is literature in a minor language. No. So let me make you understand this question itself. So what is minor literature? Now Gilles Deleuze and Felix Guattari have given a concept of minor literature in their work, right? They say that a minor literature is something which we write in a major language, right? If for me there is a major language that is Hindi, and I am writing my own work in Hindi, that is a major language, right? But the feelings, the ideas, that expression, the thoughts that I am sharing in Hindi is minor in the sense that it is oppressed, right? It does not have major voices, right? So when minor literature is literature that a minority produces in a major language, right? So this is the idea. And for instance, we have French Kafka. This is an example of because the writings of French Kafka are an example of minor literature, right? So this would be the answer. Please do not confuse major, minor literature with majority of the people. No, this is not the thing. Major means power. It is associated to power, authority, right? But minor related to the oppressed people, women, children, right? So these are minor literature. Their sentiments, their emotions, right? Question number 32 again. Oh, wild west wind, though, breath of autumn's being, though, from whose unseen presence the leaves dead are driven like ghosts from an agent of fleeing. Yellow and black and pale and hectic red, pestilence-stricken multitudes, oh, thou who chariots to their dark wintry bed. Now there is a quotation. This is from Ode to the West Wind by P.B. Shelley, romantic writer, one of my favorite poems. Then we have quote, O golden-tongued romance with serene lute, fair-plumed siren, queen of faraway. The poem written by John Keats. Okay. So, which of the following is or are correct? Okay. Both quotes are examples of apostrophe. So, in apostrophe, these are examples of literary devices. Apostrophe means to address somebody, right? To address somebody, to call somebody, whether the person is present or not, we do not care, but we have to call that person. So here we see that how, oh wild west wind, oh golden tongued romance. So this is a kind of calling. So yes, both have apostrophe. Then we have both quotes use alliteration. So let us see, do we have alliteration over here? Oh wild west wind, because there is a repetition of this syllable, this word W. So yes, we have the alliteration here. Then we have oh golden-tongued romance with siren lute fair from. No, we do not have alliteration here. So this is not the answer. Then we have both quotes are examples of aporia. Now aporia is also a literary state where text itself does not find the answer. It becomes confused, right? So this is the wrong. and both quotes are examples of personification. So let us see, because the wind has been personified, because the wind has been treated like a human being, so that is personified. So in this we have personification, and here also there is a lute that is personified, has been given qualities of a person, a human. So here also we have personification, so the answer would be A and D. 33. Prolapse is a representation or assumption in the present of a future act or development, and in the opposite to this we have analepsis, right? Analepsis. So prolapse is a kind of flash forward. So which of the following are instances of prolapse? Prolapse is all about that you are just making an assumption in the present of future act, like you are thinking in the future. Okay, 6 decades later, now we are going 6 decades later, so we are going in the future. So yes, we have prolapses here also, है ना? She would describe how at the age of 30 she had written her way through a whole history of literature and make one atonement. So yes, this is an example of prolapses. Horatio, I am dead, William Shakespeare, Hamlet. So when we read this play, we see that how Hamlet said this thing before dying, right? So he was saying this thing because he knew that his future is like this, that he would die after some minutes or some seconds. So yes, we have prolapses here. Then we have, in my younger, more vulnerable years, my father gave me some advice. Now this is in the past tense. Here we have not something which would be happening in the future. So here, that I have been turning over in my head ever since F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby. Now these are the opening lines of this novel, The Great Gatsby. So this is not an example. Then we have many years later, again we are going in the future. As he faced the firing squad, Colonel Aureliano Buendía was to remember that distant afternoon when his father took him to discover ice. So Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who is related to magical realism, as I told you earlier, 100 years of solitude, right? So here this is also an example of prolapses, right? So A, B, D would be the answer. Question number 34. Gayatri Chakravarti's P-Works essay, Can the Subaltern Speak, proposes which of the following? So here, the voice of subaltern. Who are the subaltern people? Who are the sub people, we could say? The people who we have in the majority people, but they are not in the majority. They are in the minority, and in the minority also they have some sub. They are also, below than the minority, we can say. So these subaltern people, like we have poor people, we have women, children, oppressed people. So the voice of the subaltern is appropriated, or we can say, by intellectuals desiring to speak for the subaltern. So yes, she says that these subaltern people, their voice is appropriated, like their voice has been taken from them, right, without their consent, by intellectual people. If I am talking to somebody, if I am talking to some poor people, I am talking about their experiences, I am asking about their experiences, then I am writing a work and talking of their experiences, that this happened with us as a poor people, this happens with them. But why I am doing so? Let me give them the opportunity to express themselves directly, right? So there is a desire to speak for the subaltern on my part, right? So she asking, can the subaltern speak directly? Why do they need intellectuals always? Why do they need others to speak for themselves always, right? It is easy to confuse writing about the subaltern with the subaltern speaking for herself. Of course, yes. If I am writing about the subaltern and the writing, that subaltern itself is writing. So there is a difference between these two things, but we confuse them, right? But we get confused that they are the same thing. So this is also right. All women are subaltern and therefore cannot truly speak. So this is an extreme statement. All, very extreme statement. Wrong answer. The intellectuals speaking for the subaltern and the subaltern speaking for herself can be equivalent. How can these two things be equivalent? There would be a very big difference between these two things, right? So this. Now question number 35. Which of the following are examples of metafiction? Now metafiction is when fiction in which meta, that means there is a kind of reflexivity, where we see that the writer comes in the work in any form. See, each chapter in a novel is narrated by a different character. No, The reader is a character in the novel who interrupts the story because he realizes that he is reading an incomplete text. So this is right, because in the metafiction we see how we have the interference of reader, of author in the work itself. It's like a technique that uses that you are reading a work, do not do not delve deep into the work. You have to separate yourself from the work, be it reader, be it writer. You can go there, you can see, you can observe the things. You have to treat the work as a work itself, not as a life. So for that distancing effect, right, for that distancing effect, which is a very postmodern technique, right, so this is used. Then we have the narrator of the novel travels into wild and encounters a man who embodies the horrors of colonial power. The latter then proceeds to tell his story. So this is wrong. And a character in the novel encounters a shabbily dressed man. Soon this man lets us, the readers, know that he is the author of the novel and is contemplating the future of this character. So this is also a kind of way in the metafiction. So here the answer would be A and D, right? Choose one or more options from below. In contrast to traditional historicism, new historicism. So we see that how new historicism rejects the idea that history is an objective narrative of events unfolding in linear time. Yes, this is the answer, because according to new historicism, the history is not linear. It is not linear, right? History has so many ways, because in history we have to look at the society, we have to look at the economics, we have to look at the culture, we have to look at the social conditions of that time, right? So it is not a linear thing, right? So events unfolding in linear time. So this, he rejects this idea. So this is the right. New historicism does not make strict distinctions between literary and non-literary texts. So this is also right, because for new historicism, even magazines, magazines, we have newspapers and non-literary texts, any text of medicine, any engineering book, or some book related to poetry, painting. So all these are important. They do not have any stark contrast or line between these two things. They think that all these things are important, right? Takes a particular interest in the textualization of the material word. Yes, because they see that we have to textualize. This is a word and we have to textualize it, right? You have to textualize it. You have to look at the word, right, through texts, okay? And at the same time, you have to look at the word by the text and text by the word. So these are, both the things have to go simultaneously, right? Takes history only to be a background and context for understanding text. So this is the wrong answer. So here the answer would be A, B and C. The feminist insistence that the personal is political has had profound effects on the other genres. Feminist academics in several disciplines now insist that this subjective element must not be left out of the practice of research methods such as interviews, theories of knowledge production. Now Skiggs 1995, Mains and Purvis 1994 and Ray Hart's 1992. So from the passage above, which of the following can be concluded? Now this is just to check your reading skills, just to check how you conclude things, how you grasp some passages, right? So that is why I recommend you to practice reading different things, some difficult passages like these, practice them, right? The passage argues that interviews and theories of knowledge production not examples of research methods. But here we see that the subject element must not be left out. Must not be left out. Now this is important line. Must not be left out of the practice of research method. जैसे कि interview, theory of knowledge production. So we must not leave these things, right? So this is the passage argue करता है that interview और ये सब जो चीज़ें हैं are not example of research method. तो नहीं, तो ये wrong आ जाएगा because they do argue, right? The personal is political is feminist argument. So yes, because the feminist insistence, because they have, the feminist has insist करना मतलब yes, उन्होंने इस तरह का argument किया है. So this is the right answer. The personal is political. Skaggs, Maynard, Purvis and Rehardt are names of feminist scholars, because as you see the passage, this is the passage, and then these three names are written, and these are the publishing dates. So yes, these three are the feminist scholars who has given these ideas, right? So this is the answer. Then the passage argues that the subjective can legitimately be a part of research methods. So yes, as we see this line, that the subjective element must not be left out, that you cannot left subjective things. So this must be a part of our research method. So yes, this is also right. So here the answer would be B, C and D, right? So that is how we infer, or we can say we analyze passages. Question number 838. So there is this poem, are you dark or very light, revelation came, you mean like plain or milk chocolate. Now this is a passage, poem passage, and this passage is a poem written by Soyinka, and the name of this poem is Telephone Conversation. So here the man seeking to rent a room responds to the white landlady's racism by describing black as a spectrum as opposed to a single color. This is the right answer. Being the subservient black man who concedes to her definition of race wrong, locating race squarely in her ways of seeing right, and fragmenting the racialized body. So this is right. So now there is a homework for you. Go and read this poem, Soyinka's Telephone Conversation. Now this is your homework. Please do this homework. Read this poem and try to answer this question by yourself. I have given you the answers, but do this by yourself, because when I came across with this question, I went and I read this poem and I enjoyed it a lot, because when you will read this poem, when you will actually feel the emotions of this black person, you will see that how they are facing racialist things. So please engage with the literature, right? Read poems, read dramas. This is a very small poem. Just go and read and attempt this question, right? This is a very funny poem, very a kind of mockery. It is a kind of mockery and it is satire, right? Question number 39. Arthur Conan Doyle's writings featuring Sherlock Holmes, as it is the case with much of 19th British fiction, colonialism appears as objects, events, animals, places, fears, desires. Because in these kinds of things, because in events, animal, place, fear, desire, object, different kinds of elements in any work, there is a colonialism touch in these things also. Which of the following supports this claim? Because as we read, opium dens in London, frequented by Holmes, the war in which Watson served as a doctor, the pet animals in the adventure of the speckled band. So when we read these three works, we will see that there are some things like dance, war, pet animals. So all kinds of, these things, objects, events, animals, places. So all kinds of these things, they have a touch of colonialism, even in the smallest of things. Whenever you try to read a poem, a drama, something like that, there will be some metaphors, some significant objects, events, that will give you a idea that yes, this work is all about colonialism. This work, they will give you some hint that what this work is all about, right? So that is a very smart strategy of a writer. So A, B, D would be the answer. Last question. Last question, then we have the end of the question. Last question. Now this is a poem by My Papa's Waltz by Theodore Rothke, right? So which of the following can be observed about this poem? Let us see. The form of the poem is that of the Petrarchan sonnet. So no, this is not a Petrarchan sonnet. This is a kind of, because as we see, breath, death, A, B, again we have A, B, right? So this is not a Petrarchan sonnet, because in the Petrarchan sonnet we have A, B, B, A. Okay. There is a simile in the first stanza. Let us see if there is a simile. The whiskey on your breath could make a boy dizzy, but I hung on like death. Yes, we are using, when we use as and like for comparison, this is known as simile. Okay, so yes, there is a simile. Images in the last two stanzas suggest that the father is a working class man. So last two stanzas. The hand that held my wrist was battered on one knuckle, like the fingers knuckle, these knuckles of the fingers. At every step you missed, my right ear scrapped a buckle. You beat time on my head with a palm kicked hard by dirt, because the hand, that we have here is full of, you know, dirt. It has some dirt on it. Then whirls me off to bed, still clinging to his shirt. And clinging to his shirt, because he is saying that even the shirt that you are wearing is having dirt on it. That it means that the father is a working class man. Yes. The poem is in rhyming couplets. So here we see, are they rhyming? So breath dizzy. No, they are not rhyming, because in the rhyming couplets, it is like Johnny Johnny yes papa, eating sugar no papa. So the two successive lines are rhyming. So here they are not rhyming. Breath dizzy, they are not rhyming. So these are not rhyming couplets, right? So this is wrong. So B and C is the answer. I would recommend you to go and read this poem in order to get the idea of this poem, because the more you read, the more good you become in literature, and the more closure you will get to the JRF certificate, right? So this is this end of the question paper, but not the end of our PYQ series. So we would also cover 2022, 2023, 2024 and 2025, ताकि आपको 2026 में अपना गेट का सर्टिफिकेट मिल सके, right? So please, if you like this lecture, if you enjoyed this analysis, then please subscribe to our channel. And जो मैंने आपको homework दिया है, then please do tell me in the comment section. After doing that homework, like the video, share this as much as possible, because GATE examination is coming, and after all these, you know, PYQ analysis, we would upload lectures on GATE examination also. And from the 15th January, we are coming up with the lectures for UGC NET examination June 2026. So subscribe to our channel. Thank you.